On today's show, the Nets 2025-26 campaign is in the books, and with that, so is their two-year tank. I'll reflect on the ups and downs, mostly downs, of the tank and take a look towards the future on today's episode of Locked On Nets.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to Locked On Nets. I'm Erik Slater. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. And on today's episode, the Nets season is in the books. I'm going to reflect on their two-year tank, offer my top takeaways from this season, and take a look at my top questions for the summer. Let's go. Back on the show now, we got Lucas Kaplan of Nets Daily. And Lucas, I'm calling this a celebration pod because the Nets season is in the books. They lost their season finale tonight. They got blown out by the Toronto Raptors. And with that, it's over. 20-62 on the season. They finish in the third lottery spot. And more importantly, the tank is over. The two-year tank, it was a long, arduous, treacherous 2 seasons, I'm sure, for Nets fans. It wasn't any easier for us on the beat, I'm sure. But 46-118 over the last 2 seasons, 118 losses, but it is finally over. How are we feeling, Lucas? What do you got?
A little weird. I mean, you know, the tank is over, and that doesn't guarantee that what comes next is going to be so successful, but as I wrote today, it should at least be more interesting on a day-to-day basis, and that really helps us out. It helps the fans out. It still feels a little bit like the last day of school, though. You know, I'm excited for the summer, but I'm a little bummed about some of the friends I won't see. 6 months without basketball is going to feel like a long time for, Nets basketball, I should say. And Ben Saraf crossing Jakob Poeltl right on his butt. It's like, man, you know, basketball can be cool. And even though they were god-awful the last 2 years, I like watching hoops, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that this is going to be, if you guys couldn't tell already, this is going to be a little bit more of an informal pod. We don't really we've talked about the basketball stuff to death, and we're going to do it more in the coming weeks. But just reflecting a little bit on these last couple of seasons, because this was my third and fourth seasons on the Nets beat. As a credentialed reporter, obviously took over the show. I had a ton of fun, covering the team the last 2 years. In the grand scheme of things, like, getting to do this job is a dream, but I'd be lying if I didn't say that it sucks covering a tanking team. And look, I try to be as professional as possible. I come in, I do the job to the best of my ability. I try not to show any it's tougher covering this team if they're bad or if they're good. I just do the job. But I think we all know, just the way, being a fan, it sucks covering a tanking team, obviously, because the vibes aren't great, but it's also so weird covering a team where for 2 seasons, the biggest storyline surrounding the team is the tank and their draft position, but it's something that you can't openly ask, the players about, the coach about. Like, they're not going to acknowledge it if you ask them that. Maybe sometimes you can, like, at points. I think we got some stuff out of people like Cam Johnson last season, Jordy at some points this season, but it's just like this elephant in the room that you can't really address. And I think we've spoken about it. It kind of goes antithetical to everything that basketball and pro sports are supposed to be about. So it really sucked, covering a tanking team the last 2 years. I think for the fans, it's extremely frustrating. But the reason I said this can be like a celebration pod for Nets fans is because regardless of whether they're good, whether they're bad next year, you can fully, wholeheartedly root for wins. And anytime the Nets win a game, they have a nice comeback like that game against the Pistons, or they beat up on the 76ers surprisingly like they did early in the season. You don't have to have that little voice in the back of your head that's like, this really might not be good for them in the long run. That's just fully done. But Lucas, how do you reflect on, covering a tanking team for the last 2 years and just what you think it was like for the fan base? Because you're a blogger. It's a little bit, you're more in tune with the fans maybe, or from that fan perspective a little bit.
Yeah. I more than a little voice in the back of your head cautioning against late season wins.
Yeah, screaming voice that I've
voiced.
I
think it's the biggest thing is what you touched on, this weird like layer of intangible vibe, feeling in the press conference room, in the locker room, that you can't really discuss, or that you just can't get anywhere trying to talk to players and coaches, especially on the record, despite the fact that some of them will acknowledge it, like Cam Johnson, like Nick Claxton said the other day. He said, we don't have our draft pick next year, and that expectation to win is the thing I'm looking forward to the most. But it is really weird when the main thrust of the season, the main storyline, is not one that you can really talk about all the time. And how antithetical it is to like sports and these guys' lives. And even if you played sports in high school or college or recreationally or whatever, this idea that 82 games times two, 164 games without losing is so long. It's so many months. It's so much money and time invested into trying to make sure that you lose. It's really just strange. And I'm not even anti-tank, but it's pretty damn weird. And I'm happy it's over. I'm happy it's over. And, as a fan, as much as I like to argue with people and, we do Fan Take Friday and I'm like, that's a dumb question or whatever, it's tough for me to pretend that there's a wrong way to respond to tanking. It's tough for me to look at someone and say, I could never root for these guys to lose, and say, no, you're wrong. Like, I posted that EJ Liddell quote the other day about how he woke up smiling and calling his mom because he got to start in an NBA game. And a fan commented on it, was like, well, if this guy's wearing a Nets uniform, no way I can root for him to lose a game. How could I disagree? It's just weird, and I'm so glad that it's over.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. When I started on this beat, I didn't think we were ever gonna have a point where we were getting to the end of the season and fans were like ready to riot because Jalen Wilson was closing a game in April, like against the Washington Wizards. That wasn't the direction that I saw this going. But I mean, I think if we just speak for the fan base, we take it outside of just what it's like for us reporting. I mean, this has been a rough stretch for the fan base. And honestly, it goes back even further than the tanking. Like that first year, when the Nets traded for Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson, I think that second half of the season, it was some fun for the fans because Mikal broke out. You had CJ, you had the twins, you had Doe, you had like these different vibes. But then that next season where JV got fired, that was a miserable season, man. And I mean, that wasn't a tanking season, but it almost felt like a tanking season because, Mikal Bridges is just moping around the court for the second half of the year. JV's fired. Kevin Ollie's trying to figure out whatever he can do. So, we've spoken about this because the Nets pivoted to this tank probably a year and a half later than they should have. This has really been like, 3.5 seasons that have been pretty rough for the Nets fan base. And I think that's why when I tweeted that the Nets had clinched top 3 lottery odds on Friday night, tweet got like over 1,000 likes because I think fans are just so excited at the prospect of them trying to win and getting a franchise player like this. Like, it's been rough.
And they did a good job. There's 2 things I want to say. That's the first one. They did a good job. Like, it was, listen, 1 game behind the Pacers, maybe could have. You think about a couple of those games, that Detroit and Memphis 2-game winning streak, the 7-4 December stretch. But at the end of the day, one of the 3 worst records in the league in a season where the bottom third of the league all pivoted hard to tanking. And that's not to say that the Bulls or the Bucks were going to catch the Nets, but those games against the Bucks are all of a sudden like incredibly hard games to lose, or much harder. These games against the Bulls, like those 3 games right, I think before the All-Star break, the Bulls had just pivoted to tanking. It's like all of a sudden that end of season schedule gets a lot more hard to keep the losing going. So I think they did a good job. And the other thing I kind of wanted to ask you about is one of my main kind of through lines in my writing, things I was saying before the year was, well, last year really stunk, but Keon Johnson and Jalen Wilson were the team's minutes leaders. Nothing against those guys, but this year they have 5 first-round rookies. It's going to be a lot more enjoyable to watch. There's going to be a lot more to tune in on a night-to-night basis. And I'm not sure I felt that way as much as I thought I was going to. Did you?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that especially I felt that way during the first half of the season. But
Yeah.
once we got into the second half of the year, Yegor was slowing down. He ends up getting shut down. Like once we got to the end of the season, yeah, I didn't really feel that way because you had, these guys like, Ben Saraf and Drake Powell going out there and Nolan sometimes, and even Danny, just where it didn't feel like there was a ton of structure towards the end of the year, like where they really had the onus on them to lose some of these games. Yeah, you didn't really feel that. But during the first half of the season, I mean, I was excited to get a look at these guys in each game. I felt like you could learn something different about some of these guys. But, you hit on you thinking that the Nets did a good job overall with the tank this year. I want to talk about the season overall, reflect on it, the rookies, some of the veterans that came in, how the Nets approached the tank, whether we think the season overall was a success. So we'll get into all that when we continue Locked On Nets after a quick break. Guys, there's nothing like being in an NBA arena, the crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. Guys, you'll pull up the Game Time app, pick an upcoming NBA game, and have tickets locked in within minutes. You'll love seeing the all-in price up front. No surprise fees at checkout. Being able to see the view from the seat before buying makes the decision easy. Zone deals will stand out. Choose the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save big. Everything feels quick, intuitive, and stress-free from start to finish. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today, and remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. All right, coming back from the break, continuing with today's Locked On Nets episode, got Lucas Kaplan here, and we're talking about the Nets season, their second straight tanking season, reflecting on it. And we spoke about how, it was rough. It was rough for us. It was rough for the Nets fan base. It was rough for Jordy at points. Like during these last couple of games, there were some shots of him on the Yes broadcast where he looked like he wanted to pull out his hair on his head that he doesn't have because he's bald. But, it was a rough stretch. But overall, I mean, for this season, if we're talking about goals, like I said going into the year, the 1A, 1B goals were rookie development, draft position, whichever order you want to put those in. And regardless of how you feel about the rookie class, and we'll get into that, I think they got a ton of minutes for the rookies. Like it started off slower, but they ended up between the G League and the NBA. I mean, these rookies played some of the most minutes out of any team in the league, and they finish in the top 3 of the draft lottery standings. You didn't always know if it was going to happen. It looked uncertain, but they got there. And for those reasons, I think this season was a success, and I think that they accomplished the goals that they needed to. If you bring it out to maybe the 2 seasons, there's, maybe you wish that they had a few more blue chip young guys who you were really, really excited about. We can talk about that. We can talk about this rookie class, some of the other guys they brought in. But overall, the rookies got a lot of minutes. A guy like MPJ, they completely rehabilitated his value. They got themselves in a good draft position to get potentially a franchise-altering pick. So I think that fans can rest easy and be pleased with what the Nets were able to accomplish this season. But what do you think, Lucas? What's your take?
No, yeah, I agree. Quick aside, split second answer. Do you think MPJ has played his last game for the Nets?
I do. I'm not confident at that at all. Like I think we spoke about this on a couple of episodes a couple of weeks ago, but I think it's pretty 50-50, but I definitely think they're going to investigate the trade market for him. But I also think that there's a lot of variables, like where they land in the draft, some of that, some of the other moves some of the other players that could potentially become available on the trade market. There's a lot to, go there. I'm really 50-50. I don't have a definitive answer either way.
I would have said yes, and I've said yes to this exact question before. I actually think I'm going to say no. Don't feel super confident in it, but I do also think it's a hard sell to ownership, to the fans, to the head coach, to anybody, getting rid of the one guy that is a playoff level rotation player and a 25 a night scorer, at least he can be, and a ridiculous shooter when you're trying to take a step forward. But
you were saying no. You were saying no that you think he's gonna be on the team next season. You're saying,
yeah. Sorry, okay. He hasn't played his last
game.
Yeah.
No. We can talk about that more in the last segment. But yeah, I think that it's definitely a tough sell. But there's a lot of variables that are going to go into that.
Right.
But yeah, go on the season.
Well, the rookies, it kind of goes back to that question or that premise, right? That this season would be much easier to watch because of these rookies. And, I felt that way certainly a little. I felt that way when Yegor was banking in heat checks against the Magic and 5 seconds left in a close game. It was better. No shade. I enjoyed it more than watching D'Angelo Russell do that same exact thing against the Rockets 2 years ago.
Yeah.
That being said, I think part of it, I'm a little bit disappointed by the rookie class.
Yeah.
As a collective. I mean, three of the guys, two of the guys, Drake and Ben, and again, 22, 26 overall picks, but two of those guys hardly had any real prolonged stretches or great games that got you really excited. I think Drake was on a bit of a jump shooting heater in like November and December, but that masked kind of an overall lack of impact and production. And, I'm not asking these guys to be positive players at 19, 20 years old, but in terms of projectable strengths and impact, not a great season for those two. Wasn't the highest on Wolf, especially against real competition. And then even like Yegor, who was a positive, he also had a tendency of, and I'm not going to blame him for this, and take a dump all over his NBA future, but he could be low activity. He could fade into the background, right? And Nolan, obviously, as a small, 19-year-old point guard was pretty rough for most of the year. So I think that also played into it. And I don't think my opinion on their whole draft class has changed quite as much as I felt like I was mid-season. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, look, they did see these guys, but that was also part of it. They had some guys that weren't great and also had a tendency to fade into the background, and that's not a critique of the Nets coaching staff or the development plan. I like that they use Long Island. I like that how they handled the minutes, but it's just kind of more of a reflection of the players.
Yeah, on the note of the development plan, like me saying the season was a success, the bottom line is that they gave these guys opportunities, to play a lot, which is a big part of it. And then, some of the veterans that they got in the door who showed promise, whether you talk about MPJ or them getting a younger guy like Minot at the deadline, that's a win in my opinion. And obviously getting into the top 3 of the lottery odds, both of those things, I think we can separate that from what the rookies actually looked like. But yeah, if we're, going into the rookie class, and look, I'm going to do a whole series doing a deep dive on each rookie's season and, kind of what I thought. And Lucas, I'm sure will be on for some of those. But yeah, I wasn't enthralled with the way that the rookies look this season. Look, they're all very young. We know that. I think when it comes to the optimism surrounding this rookie class, Yegor is he's got a heavy load on his back. He's doing some heavy lifting when it comes to the optimism surrounding the rookies. Look, I think Yegor is going to be a good player. I think that there's obviously still a lot of question marks. I think that at least the guy who I feel the best about, who showed, I think, the most promise, is their first lottery pick in 15 years and was the most important pick. But yeah, outside of that, I mean, of those 4 guys, Nolan, Drake, Danny, Ben, I don't feel very good about any of them. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I would say I feel the best about honestly, maybe Danny, Nolan and Danny, but I don't feel great about him. I mean, the closing stretch of the season, we all know, Ben showed some flashes. It was pretty rough for him for most of the season. He just, the jump shot is so far away. And we can talk briefly about each of these guys individually, but he's pretty far away. Drake, there were some worries with the usage that he posted at North Carolina that he was going to come in here and look like an offensive zero, as a first-round pick. And I think that was largely the case, even if he had some nice moments. And then Danny, I mean, I think I'm the most encouraged about him just because he's 6'11", and I think he does have some outlier skills, but there's a lot of questions there. And I said this on my last pod. I talked about outside of Yegor, none of these guys can shoot right now. And that was the knock on them. You look Danny's 32%, Ben's 22% from 3. Nolan was 31. Drake was 27. They're hoping that some of these guys can figure it out and learn how to shoot, but there's just a lot of question marks. And it's not like the shooting is the only part of their game that is the question mark. Like for Nolan, he's a 6'4" below the rim player. How is he going to be able to finish? And he doesn't have the jump shooting ability right now. Ben, obviously the jump shooting is just even further than anybody else. Danny, also, not a good finisher, even if he's a bigger guy. Drake, just very limited from an on-ball perspective. Like, there's just a lot of questions, and I don't want to turn this into like a doom or gloom thing. These guys are really young. You got to give them an extended runway. But yeah, outside of Yegor, I think that it's looked promising early on for some of these guys in spurts, but then kind of some of the critiques that some of the outside world had about this next draft class, I think you kind of started to see some of that, kind of bear out as the season progressed.
Right. And this isn't like a definitive critique and estimate of how Nolan's career will go, but De'Aaron Fox was a extremely fast guard in a similar-ish frame that really needed to pack on pounds after his rookie season, and obviously the jump shooting became way better than I think a lot of people thought, particularly in the mid-range. De'Aaron Fox shot 60% at the rim his rookie year and like turned a lot of that speed for all of his misgivings and warts into a lot of finishes at the rim. Nolan shot 45% from the rim this year. He made a few floaters, but was kind of below average from that intermediate area, as well as obviously like a pull-up jump shooter. Even the three-point shot, obviously we know Nolan is a better catch and shoot three-point shooter than off the dribble, but even then, like mid-30s and then low 30s, like 20s off the dribble, so I don't really know where he's going to score from. My point being that, yes, he's fast. Yes, the speed is there, but I didn't really see that leading to a ton of production this year. And so against all odds, I think I'm going to go with Danny as like the guy I have the second most hope for. I was not always on board with that, but there's size. There is some shooting projection. Again, the size on defense helps. There's some outlet passing. They didn't play fast at all this year. Maybe that'll help him in the future. And Drake probably had the worst season of the guys, but do you want to take at least some solace in the tools that he still has? I'm kind of debating that. Like, he's not really a powerful finisher around the rim. I know he had that one huge dunk in transition, but like in the half court, powering through contact, turning his drives into like high flying finishes, you don't really see it. And the tools right now are just so theoretical that it was not really an encouraging season from him. So, man, I thought this was supposed to be a celebratory podcast. You let me talk for far too long.
It's celebratory in the sense that the tank is over. And look, these guys can turn it around. I mean, we've seen a lot of sophomore leaps. Like, I'm not going to act like, and at the end of the day, like them making 5 first-round picks, it was a numbers game. And I think we said entering the year, if they get 2 quality rotation players out of that group, I think that that's a win. And there's, still, I think a decent chance that could happen. And I think that we're going to do individual pods talking about each of these guys. And I think that we'll be able to do more deep dives into their games. That's going to be coming over the next week. The last thing I want to talk about in this show is just what we're looking forward to this summer, what we think some of the biggest question marks are, what we're most interested to see, directionally from this Nets team. So we'll get into all that when we close out Locked On Nets after a quick break. The NBA playoffs are here, where every possession matters, every matchup is magnified, and every game can swing a series. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get in on the action. Here's what you'll love about it. You can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. The app makes it easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, and matchups all in one place. And during the playoffs, that extra insight really matters when you're looking at stars, role players, and key moments. It just makes the entire playoff experience more engaging from start to finish. Guys, we got the play-in tournament coming up. We got the first-round series. You can bet on any of those. You can bet on what game you think a series is going to end in. You can bet on the highest scorer in games. You can bet on all the player props, any of that. So head to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in the waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's a relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to TurboTax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. All right, coming back from the break, closing out today's Locked On Nets episode, got Lucas Kaplan here, recapping the season, recapping the Nets 2-year tank. And I want to talk now about what we're looking forward to this summer. What are we most interested to see directionally? And I think that I would say for me, I'm most interested to see how much rope does Sean Marks and this front office have to build this out patiently. You know what I mean? Like, how much pressure is there on this front office to take a sizable step forward, and how fast? Because I said, I mean, it's been rough for, what is it? Almost 3.5 seasons now. 3 seasons, you would say, were really rough for this Nets fan base. And we know.
Yeah. How old am I? How old am I?
You're 25, I think.
That's how long it's been rough.
Okay. All right, jeez. Lucas is like, you're getting a rep for just the doomer and gloomer on the podcast.
No,
I got a question. I got a question on Fan Take Friday yesterday, and I said, it was the guy said, as a pessimistic New Jersey Nets fan, assuming we get the 8th pick, like Lucas in parentheses, I was like, Lucas, you're developing a rep here, man. Get a be a glass half full guy.
I just had to make that joke that you laid it up for me.
Yeah, I did. I put it up as an oop, but shit, I lost my train of thought now. What was I just saying? Oh, yeah, the last 3 years have been rough, and I think we know somewhat that Joe Tsai might have not been the most enthused about going in the tanking direction. So with that, we know that Joe and like some of these people, they wear it on their chin when the Nets lose. Like, this hasn't been easy the last couple of years. So with that, it would be kind of logical to think they're going to be real pumped up about the prospect of winning. How much does that lead them to say, let's do it. Let's go, Sean. You know what I mean? Like, put your money where your mouth is. Like, that's going to be the question of the offseason for me. And that's what I'm interested to see. And we're going to ask Sean Marks about it, tomorrow morning during the exit interviews, but that's the top question for me. So Lucas, any thoughts you have about that? And then whatever other developments you're looking for this offseason in terms of how, the Nets front office builds this out, how some guys develop, things along those lines.
Yeah, the only concrete thing that I'm wondering about is what they do with their center rotation, honestly, because there are so many ways they can get better. We've had this conversation in the media room before, but like Giannis, a big splash, maybe kind of panicky trade for Giannis might be at this end of the spectrum, the far end of the spectrum, right? But there is so much they can do that is less than that would help this team. Like, you can name so many rotation players on playoff guys that would, even like Minot. Like, I think this next year's team, with or without Minot, it might not be a 10 or 12 win difference, but I think in the fourth quarter of a close game next December, Nets fans are going to be really glad they went out and got Minot last deadline. So, point being, there are so many different guys that they can trade for or sign that will help this team. How aggressive they are, how much they want to sacrifice long-term assets. They have all these picks in the future. I think it's fine to include them in trades. You don't want to light the whole asset chest on fire, but they're certainly going to come up. Obviously, that is the big story, right? And then the other thing for me is how they handle the Nick Claxton, Day'Ron Sharpe center rotation. It's tough to pay 21. I know it's a descending contract, but 21 million to Nick right now is a lot for a team trying to be good. And then you also have this option where it's like, if we can pay $6 million to our starting center in Day'Ron Sharpe by picking up his team option, if not extending him, doesn't that lead to a lot of positive team building pathways? So that's a big question for me in terms of like specific guys going into this offseason.
Yeah, I honestly think that they extend Day'Ron. Like, that's, kind of the direction that I think they go. And then, yeah, I mean, like, the two top veteran guys on this team are Michael Porter Jr. and Nick Claxton. You could say, sure, like, if you're trying to win next season, it might be, a luxury to keep both of those guys on the roster. And I think that MPJ and Clax are, vastly different circumstances and situations, but it might not be the most prudent long-term move to keep both of those guys on the roster. That doesn't mean you have to get rid of both of them, but I definitely think that that's something that they're going to investigate. And then, outside of that, like just the team building stuff, which we're going to talk about a ton this offseason, I'm just really interested to see what the rookies, the development plan for the summer, like what these guys come back, prioritizing, like what are some of the things we hear about from them. And I think that it's going to be the biggest summer of development in Nets franchise history. I mean, they have 5 rookie first round picks. And I think that, you guys, the listeners, could probably guess how we feel about the prospects of those guys contributing to winning in a serious way next season. I mean, I think Yegor can do it. Danny, maybe Nolan. Like, I don't want to write any of them off, but Nets are going to be trying to win next season. And, if they're getting into, it's going to be interesting to see, like, they're trying to win and you still want to develop these guys. How long of a leash do some of these guys have to play next season if they're not, delivering positive impact on the court? Like, that's going to be one of my top questions. And how these guys develop during the summer is going to be, huge. And I think that Yegor obviously is going to be at the front of the line. And, we only got a couple more minutes here, but I got asked an interesting question yesterday on Fan Take Friday, Lucas, and it was based around Yegor. And it said, Erik, if you could guarantee one skill for Yegor to develop this summer, and, he said, like, rim finishing, ball handling, defense, some of those things, and, like, nothing is going to get completely just, nothing is going to go from 0 to 100 practically. But in my most practical assessments, I said adding strength, I think, would be like the biggest thing. Like if Yegor could add 10 pounds of muscle, which is a lot, I think that would help him a lot. But if you could, answer that question developmentally, like what's the one area where you would like to see Yegor take a big leap next season if you could choose one?
Yeah, this is like what I would want, what might not be the most feasible, but right? Is that the kind of the angle of the question?
Yeah, I mean, within reason, like something that's somewhat practical.
I mean, it's tough not to go with that because it does feel very achievable. It does feel achievable. I would go with that. The other thing that worries me about him is like the handle and kind of quick twitch burst just to get by guys, just to put some pressure on the defense. I don't think that is impossible to improve on a little bit, but I don't think he is ever going to be much more wiggly. Like even Cam Johnson at his best, who was, pretty famously a limited creator, not a lot of shake. Even his best days with the Nets, he wasn't blowing by a ton of people, though he did like definitely develop some counters, some off the dribble jump shooting, which is another area of growth for Yegor. He was kind of quietly an average-ish, a little bit above average off the dribble jump shooter this season. But I would say like the strength and physicality stuff, I just think it'll give him a little bit more of a window to hang. When he gets bumped on a drive, when he's coming to 2 feet, the defense, like that'll be big for him. And I'm I'll say this. I'm genuinely looking forward to watching him again next year. Him being ruled out for the season really sucked.
Yeah. No, I mean, he was one of the most exciting parts of the season. And once he went out, it definitely lost some of its juice. But Lucas, we got a lot to look forward to. We got, less than a month until the draft lottery, which is once again going to be the most consequential day, one of the most consequential days in Nets franchise history. We're going to talk to Sean Marks, Jordy Fernandez, some of the players tomorrow. We're going to have a lot more pods talking about the rookie class, the plans for the offseason, all that. But appreciate you taking the time as always. Appreciate you hanging in there, throughout these last 2 seasons and making plenty of appearances on the podcast. But we will definitely have many more. And yeah, man, I appreciate you taking the time as always. That does it for today's episode of Locked On Nets. If you guys do not already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you enjoy my content, take a second right now, smash that like button, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review. Anything you can do to engage is much appreciated. We're going to be talking to Sean Marks and some of the Nets players tomorrow. I got a lot of content coming up surrounding the Nets rookies, their plans for the summer. So I'll have coverage of all that and more when I'm back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.